We have a ton of legislative news to dig into today. We'll be talking about the Equality Act. We will be talking about COVID relief. But before talking about any of that, massive news late last night. The House of Representatives, thanks to Democrats, mostly this was Democrats who voted for this. Democrats in the House have passed the massive voting rights and anti-corruption bill HR1. Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna talked to us about this when we interviewed him last week. And this is not the first time that HR1 has passed in the House. It's the second time that it has passed. Just like the first time it passed, it's not clear how it passes the Senate, and we'll talk about that. But this is an extensive bill, 800 pages, all sorts of different things contained within it. But the big items are a national system for automatic voter registration. This is something I've been talking about for a decade. It's something that would dramatically increase participation in elections, and it would ask. Right now, you have to opt in if you want to register to vote. The default is if you do nothing, you're not registered. You have to opt in. The system proposed in HR1 would create an automatic voter registration system where you have to opt out if you don't want to be registered to vote. And why would you do that? If you don't want to vote, you just wouldn't vote. And most people would just remain registered. The bill would require every state to put online options for voter registration, correcting your voter registration, canceling or designating a party affiliation, things that in other countries are just obvious that you have. Any developed country should have these things. The bill would require at least 15 consecutive days of early voting for federal elections, and early voting sites would have to be open for at least 10 hours a day. This would short circuit and preempt many of the state level voter suppression tactics that Republicans have been using for a long time. And the bill would also ban states from restricting someone's ability to vote by mail. And it will also require states to prepay postage on return envelopes for mail-in voting so it doesn't cost people money to vote by mail. The bill would ban voter roll purges and also would ban the use of non-forwardable mail as a way to remove voters from rolls. Every one of these elements goes directly at a technique used by the right to suppress the vote. And very interestingly, HR1 establishes a public financing of campaigns with small donations. The federal government would do a voluntary 6-to-1 match for candidates for president and Congress, which means every dollar a candidate raises from small donors, the federal government would match 6 times over. And the maximum small donation that would be matched is capped at $200. It's not funded by taxpayer dollars. The money comes from a 4.75% fee on criminal and civil fines, fees, penalties, and settlements with banks and corporations that do corporate malfeasance. Very interesting way to structure and finance this. And it also contains, and again, we can't possibly cover every line, but there are transparency requirements for political advertising in HR1. It would establish nonpartisan redistricting commissions to end partisan gerrymandering. Massive issue. Again, we've been talking about it for a decade. It would require presidential and vice presidential candidates to disclose 10 years of tax returns. And we know directly what that's related to. It would stop members of Congress from using taxpayer money to settle sexual harassment or discrimination cases, and so many other things. Now, beautiful bill has passed the House. How does it pass the Senate? And the answer is it doesn't unless it's modified significantly, but maybe something can pass. The question is why? Democrats control the Senate. Democrats voted for this in the House. Why can't Democrats pass it? The answer is there are just too many moderates in the Democratic Party in the Senate, and the majority is too slim. In fact, it's the slimmest possible majority. The Senate is 50-50, Democrats, Republicans. Because Democrats are in the White House, Kamala Harris becomes the tie-breaking vote in the Senate when there is a 50-50 tie. But this requires 60 votes to pass the Senate. So in other words, I'm unsure that if it only required 50, it would pass the Senate. But they need 60 votes anyway. Now, one idea that Democrats are thinking about is amending the Senate filibuster rules so that any democracy reform legislation like HR1 could pass with a simple majority instead of 60 votes. Now, that's great if Joe Manchin goes for it, and that's very much unclear. If Jeanne Shaheen goes for it, I don't know if this is a bill that Jeanne Shaheen is interested in passing. So right now, the situation anyway is you need 60 votes. Now, this is an issue on which there is almost no overlap between Democrats and Republicans. We talk on this program, some shows love to take these black-white positions like there's no relevant difference between Democrats and Republicans. And the truth is that on some issues, there's no relevant difference between Democrats and Republicans. And on other issues, they couldn't be more different. Democrats, at least in the House, are passing HR1, which is a massive expansion in voting rights. It would permanently cement many temporary expansions on the basis of coronavirus. That's Democrats, at least in the House. On the other hand, as we talked about on, I think it was Monday, Republicans have more than 250 bills in 43 different states to suppress the vote, to make it more difficult to vote. So these are diametrically opposed priorities on these issues between Democrats and Republicans. Democrats doing everything they can to increase participation in elections, Republicans doing everything they can to decrease participation. Now, you can take a cynical view and say, well, both sides are doing what they think is best for them. Democrats believe more people voting is good for Democrats. Republicans believe fewer people voting is good for Republicans. They are both probably correct. The difference is one of them is actually in line with the principles and values that this country is based on, which is not disenfranchising people, giving people a voice, not obstructing the ability of people to participate in the democratic process. It's hard to argue that the country is based on the values that are exhibited by 250 Republican bills in 43 states to suppress the vote. So, yeah, sure, you can take the view that it's quite simple and it's Democrats want more people to vote, so they win. Republicans want fewer people to vote, so they win. One of those perspectives happens to be in line with the foundation of this country. Now, as a very practical matter in the immediate, Republicans have a particularly pressing reason to oppose HR1, which is that their winning the House back in 2022 could depend on whether something like HR1 passes or doesn't pass. And we'll talk more about that in the future. That's HR1. Let's now talk about COVID stimulus. One of our sponsors is Monk Pack. It's tough to get excited about most granola bars. They have a lot of carbs. They don't taste that great. They don't really satisfy your cravings. But Monk Pack has something totally different. Monk Pack Keto granola bars are sweet and delicious with a soft and chewy texture, only 140 calories, 1 gram of sugar, and only 2 to 3 net carbs, which make them work perfectly for the keto or low carb lifestyles. They come in excellent flavors like coconut cocoa chip, honey nut, blueberry almond vanilla. That's my new favorite. I love these because you can just grab them anytime. Maybe it's a quick breakfast, an afternoon snack when you're busy. Forget the dry, bland granola bars you've had in the past. Try out Monk Pack Keto granola bars. If you don't love them like I do, they'll give you all of your money back. You'll get 20% off when you go to monkpack.com and use the coupon code Pakman. The link is underneath this video.